Do you have unshakable faith? In Mark chapter 13, Jesus isn't just going to warn his apostles about bad things that are coming their way. He's preparing them for the inevitable and to assure that their faith remains solid long after he's ascended to heaven. Jesus is basically teaching a masterclass on unshakable faith. He's trying to prepare them for the day when everything they know is going to change. And in order to weather those kinds of days, they needed to be certain about three very crucial things. And I want to share those with you today because they're important for your faith. And the third one is something that we need to be very bold in as Christians because of our present world. Mark chapter 13 sets up exactly like Matthew 24. Jesus and the apostles are leaving the temple, that the apostles are pointing out the buildings to him. They even mention the stones in Mark 13. And Jesus just basically stops in the middle of the conversation and says, do you see all these great buildings? Not one stone is going to be left upon another that will not be torn down. And that should throw our minds right over to the 118th Psalm. In fact, I would journal that in your Bible. God's got a new temple in mind. And Jesus is saying, this is the end of Judaism. He's saying you need to get ready for the destruction of Jerusalem. It's inevitable. It's coming. Now, this is obviously something that is disconcerting to the apostles. They go up to the Mount of Olives, and they essentially pose the same questions that we see in Matthew. It's a little bit of a shorter version of it, but they ask him, when are these things going to happen, and what will be the sign when all these things are going to be fulfilled? If you want to see more on that, I've got a card right over here that you can click on, and it'll take you to that video. But rather than answering their question, and I'm going to put this up on the screen, this is the first thing that he's worried about. See to it that no one misleads you. Many will come in my name saying, I am he, and will mislead many. So when you hear of wars and rumors of wars, do not be frightened. Those things must take place, but that is not yet the end. For nation will rise up against nation and kingdom against kingdom, and there will also be earthquakes in various places. There will also be famines. These things are merely the beginning of the birth pangs. They were going to see some cultural events. They were going to see some geological events. And that was going to cause people to say, this has got to be the return of Messiah. And anytime that one of those events was going to come up, somebody was going to step up and say, I'm the Messiah, the chosen one that you've been looking for. And Jesus' concern is that they would believe that they would fall in line with that false teaching. And that's one of the things that we need to keep in mind. When there's difficulty in society, false teaching goes off the rails, that you will never see the prosperity gospel flourish as much as when there is economic turmoil, because people want to buy into that idea of security. Jesus is concerned that they're going to be deceived. Somebody is going to say, I've got a new message from Jesus. And doesn't that sound like a lot of the charismatic movements today? What did Jesus just say here? Don't believe them. That the things going on in our world are very natural. Those things, wars and rumors of wars and earthquakes, were all going to precede the destruction of the temple. Don't be misled. Before I move into the second thing that he's worried about here, we need to talk about some action items. What can we do to protect ourselves from some very popular doctrines, whether you're talking about the prosperity gospel or you're talking the woke Christianity movement that's the accept everything kind of movement? Those doctrines are popular because they appeal to the masses, but they don't really say anything. They don't really point anyone to Jesus. If we're going to protect ourselves, we need to know that these things are coming. I'm thinking about 2 Timothy chapter 4, where Paul warned Timothy, preach the word, be ready in season, out of season. It says, for the time will come, verse 3, when they will not endure sound doctrine, but wanting to have their ears tickled, they will accumulate for themselves teachers in accordance with their own desires, and will turn away their ears from the truth and will turn aside to myths. So Paul is telling Timothy, it is inevitable. In the last days, you are going to face people who are going to teach false doctrine. They're going to teach it for comfort. They're going to teach it for acceptance. They're going to teach it because they think it might be an end to persecution. If I can tell people they're coming to Jesus, but they don't have to give up their sinful lifestyle, then I'm not going to suffer persecution like those people that are trying to hold to the Bible. In chapter 3, he's talking about those same false teachers. He says that in the last days, difficult times will come. Here's what's going to make these times difficult. In fact, I talked about these in the previous video on Will Your Faith Survive the Last Days? I've got a link in the card right over here. Here's what's going to make those days difficult. For men are going to be lovers of self, lovers of money, and on it goes. But their motivation shows up at the end of verse 4, that they're going to be lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God. And then look at what it says in verse 5. Holding to a form of godliness, although they have denied its power, avoid such men as these. Jesus wanted his apostles to know in Mark 13 that if someone came with a message that wasn't what he had taught them, that it wasn't true. And don't let the turmoil in society take you away from the truth. The reason why tribulation, social upheaval, unrest in society, and the rumors of wars shakes the faith of so many people is because their faith is not grounded in what the Bible actually says. And for Christians, this is our lifeline. We need to be able to say, Lord, come quickly, even if everything that we know comes collapsing around us, because our faith is in something greater. And that brings me to the second thing that Jesus was concerned about for the sake of his apostles. Again, this is kind of a masterclass on faith. Taking in that idea of discernment, the question really comes to, how do I put that into practice in my daily life? We talked about the concept, but you need to stick around for some strategies, because we're going to talk about that next. This is his second concern. Be on your guard. Well, he's already told them to be on their guard against being deceived, but now he says, be on your guard, for they will deliver you to the courts, and you will be flogged in the synagogues, and you will stand before the governors and the kings for my sake as a testimony to them. And the gospel must first be preached to all the nations. And when they arrest you and hand you over, do not worry beforehand about what you are to say, but say whatever is given to you in that hour, for it is not you who speaks, but is the Holy Spirit. He specifically tells them that they're going to have to trust in what's revealed to them. But why is this important? He says, because brother's going to betray brother to death, and a father his child, and children will rise up against their parents and have them put to death, and you will be hated by all because of my name, but the one who endures to the end, he will be saved. Jesus is saying that faith here is not just believing in Jesus, it is endurance until the end, that the one who endures to the end will be saved. What that means is there are going to be some who start out, but they don't endure to the end. Some people will say, well, that person was never in a saved relationship. That's not what Jesus says. Jesus is concerned. He knows that there are some who are not going to endure to the end, and he doesn't want his apostles to be among those. It's because it's unimaginable difficulty. I mean, not only do you have floggings and scourgings and trials and persecutions, but you've got family delivering family over to death, because that's how much Christianity is hated. That sort of takes me back to the Sermon on the Mount, where Jesus says, blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. He specifically says in verse 11, blessed are you when people insult you and persecute you and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me or for my name's sake. Rejoice and be very glad, for your reward in heaven is great, because in the same way they persecuted the prophets. Jesus isn't being timid about the kind of difficulties that they're going to face. In fact, if anything, he's really painting a very bleak picture, but he's doing it because he wants them to endure to the end. And there's an element to both of these things that really speaks to the important role of community in faith. I think about Hebrews chapter 10, where they're really admonished and encouraged to hold on to each other, to hold fast their confession and not waver, and to consider how can they stimulate one another to love and to good works, and don't fall into this habit of forsaking the assembling together. That's become the habit of some. But you need to be encouraging one another even more as they see the day drawing near. And the day that he's talking about there, if you continue reading Hebrews 10, he says in verse 35, do not throw away your confidence, which has a great reward, for you have need of endurance. It's the same thing that Jesus said over in Mark chapter 13. The one who endures to the end will be saved. You have need of endurance, so that when you have done the will of God, you may receive what was promised. For yet in a very little while, he who is coming will come and will not delay, but my righteous one shall live by faith. And if he shrinks back, my soul has no pleasure in him. But we are not of those who shrink back to destruction, but of those who have faith to the preserving of the soul. He says, you need to be careful that you don't shrink back, or Jesus isn't going to have any pleasure in you. If you pull back from your community, if you pull back from your confession, you can fall out of association with Jesus. Now, that is a scary thought. One of the things that's supposed to protect us from that is our community of faith. We could keep going through Hebrews and see a lot more of this. It's mentioned down in Hebrews 12. Again, it's mentioned over in Hebrews 13. But the importance of being connected to people who will encourage and reassure our faith is so, so important. And that's one of the things that happened to us during COVID, when people started saying, well, maybe I don't need to church as much. Maybe I don't need to assemble as much. Maybe it really is all about just what I do with Jesus. And faith is in decline. That people who even 5-10 years ago identified as Bible believing Christians, many of them just don't have the same pattern of faith that they did. Well, what happened? Well, they disconnected from their community. You're going to have to realize that your community is not going to be your father and your mother or your brother or your sister. It's not going to be your friends and your neighbors. Those may be the people that turn against you. And we need to understand when difficult times come, sometimes the people that we think are the most for us are the ones who have the greatest ability to injure and harm us. If you're thinking about things in a new way, and this kind of full contact Bible teaching is opening your eyes, I want you to hit that subscribe button, because I want you to always have this as a resource to help you endure whatever's in front of you, or to help you overcome whatever's behind you. And this is the kind of program that we do on the channel. Now, the other side of this coin comes with a different set of practical applications, because the day of persecution and tribulation was not the only thing that Jesus was worried about. He's going to go into some specifics about this tribulation that was going to fall Jerusalem. And that's that Daniel 9 stuff that we talked about in the Matthew 24 video. Again, I got a card for it right over here. And really, that's an important video for you to watch. If you really want to understand all the connections in these passages, he says in verse 19, "For those days will be the time of tribulation, such has not occurred since the beginning of the creation, which God created until now, and never will." It says, "Unless the Lord had shortened those days, no life would have been saved." Basically, all the Jews, all the Christians would have been wiped out, because that's how mad the Roman army was about this. And so we have this warning again. It's the same as the first warning. "Behold, here's the Christ," or "Behold, there he is. Do not believe him, for false Christ will arise and will show signs and wonders in order to lead astray, if possible, even the elect. But take heed, behold, I have told you everything in advance." So Jesus says, when that day comes and you see people claiming to be able to do miracles, you see people, with these lying signs and wonders, and think about that phrase shows up in Revelation, that they're not true. Matthew's account says, when I return, it's going to be like lightning. You're not going to miss it. It's not going to be I'm in the wilderness, or I'm in the upper room, or I'm here in secret. It's going to be like lightning. And Jesus basically says it's not associated with the destruction of Jerusalem. I think Mark 13 makes that even clearer than Matthew does. We all expect Jesus to come back at any time. Most of us have woken up at some point, and our first prayer has probably sounded like something like, "God, how much longer is this world going to go on with as wicked and as evil as it is?" That's not my responsibility to worry about. That's God's responsibility. But what is my responsibility is I need to take this seriously, because the third thing that Jesus seems to be concerned about when you look at verses 28 through 32 is that they're going to fall into complacency. The destruction of the temple is bad, but Jesus didn't return then. Well, what happens after that? Well, they need to be ready for his return, and they need to live every day like it could be that day. But what happens when that return is delayed? Mark includes this parable that isn't included in Matthew. He says it's like a man who went away on a journey, who upon leaving his house and putting his slaves in charge, assigning to each one his task, also commanded the doorkeeper to stay on the alert. Therefore, be on the alert, for you do not know when the master of the house is coming, whether in the evening, at midnight, or when the rooster crows, or in the morning, in case he should come suddenly and find you asleep. What I say to you, I say to all. So this isn't just applicable to you. This part's going to be applicable to everybody that hears you. Be on the alert. And so that's the third thing that Jesus was worried about, that they were going to fall into this complacency, that they weren't going to pursue this active, steadfast, remaining firm, enduring till the end kind of faith, that after the destruction of Jerusalem, that they might think, well, that's over, so then it becomes easy. Jesus is basically telling them, no, your work is just getting started. And that's one of those things that a strong community of faith can really help us with. But it's important that we understand how to cultivate a spirit of watchfulness. How do we prepare for something that we know is inevitable, but has also been delayed a long time? I asked this question Sunday morning in a Bible class. We were studying 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, and I asked them, how do you prepare for something you know is inevitable? You know that it is coming, but you don't know when it's coming. How do you live in readiness? Well, the answer to that is you have to live in harmony with it. You can't live in tension with it. You can't live in a way that is unready and then hope to pivot before the day gets here, because you might get caught unaware. You have to get not only comfortable in that state of readiness, you have to anticipate what's on the other side of it. I'd like to see your comments on this. How do you prepare for the day of judgment? How do you stay ready? It has to be your anticipation. That my anticipation can't be the things that come before it that I hope I get done in this life before that day shows up. My anticipation can't be my retirement or my next big vacation or my next huge win in some other endeavor. My anticipation has to be the return of the Lord. If Jesus returns and it throws all my earthly plans out the window, then great, come Lord Jesus. If I never get to climb, which it's not one of on my bucket list. But if I never get to climb Mount Everest because Jesus returns, that I might actually say thank you for that one. I'm not in any shape to climb Mount Everest. But if I never get to check everything off my bucket list because Jesus returns, who cares? I'm on to the next thing. I'm on to something better. Realizing how our life is supposed to be preparing us for that inevitability is so, so important. And I want to know in the comments, how do you prepare for that? How do you keep yourself ready every single day? You may help someone. I'm going to do some long form videos on this. In fact, I got a video coming out later this week about a person who didn't make that preparation. We need to understand from this master class of faith that we really can build a strong, vibrant faith when the whole world is falling apart. We've really just scratched the surface here. I mean, we're focused on Jesus's concerns in this episode, but when you think about the context around this, it is so much bigger and it is so misused. And the misuse of it is leading many people astray. And you need to be clear on why Jesus is even answering these questions to begin with, how he's answering them. You need to be clear on what he's trying to help his apostles understand is about to come to pass. And we didn't touch on much of that in this video. And that's why this is the next one you need to watch right over here so that you're not deceived and that you can build a faith that looks like the one that Jesus is encouraging you to have. So you need to click right here. Until I see you again, have a good day and God bless.